I don't even know how to really start this one out, Crystal. I've always been able to talk about my story, and a lot of people have heard my story of the challenges and the things I've had to overcome through my health. But there's a very unique piece of our story that a lot of people don't hear about Crystal. Crystal and I have been married for 21 years, and she's been with me through thick and thin, through our business, through my all my medical challenges, and it's pretty cool. It's really cool to dive into this. Just us talking about it, preparing to talk about this is really neat. To just a reminder of how lucky I am, because Crystal saved my life. So, Crystal, we talk about no options. I've got this no option approach that I talk about, and you've really been one to kind of help me dive in and get behind that no option approach. So tell us a little bit about the story and that unique time that we went through.
Well, I think really, this started early on, even when we were dating. Very quickly realized, this was what was meant to be. When we got together and decided to start our business, we talked about just one of us keep our corporate job and the other leave. Do we jump in both feet? How do we handle this? And we decided together that we really wanted to give ourselves no way out. We wanted to have no options to fail. We wanted to make sure that we gave it 200% of what we had. So we decided to both quit our corporate jobs and start a business together. I had a couple of worries about that. It is not in my history to do those sort of things.
It wasn't a couple; it was a lot. Believe me, she had a lot of worries, but you helped me through it though.
I did. I know that we have different strengths and superpowers, as some people might say. His is in front of people. Mine is in the background. Mine is making things happen. We talk about the swan on top of the water. This has always been kind of Ty's saying, is that the swan looks so beautiful just as it's gliding across the top of the water, but you don't see the feet that are puddling underneath frantically to keep moving. And I think that's kind of how we approached our business. We really did have no options. We both quit and went full force into making this successful. And it was hard. It was really hard. There were times where I thought, I don't know if we made the right decision. I don't know if we can make this work. I don't know how to keep going. And we really said, we didn't give ourselves a choice. We really honestly didn't. I mean, what were we going to do? Go out and start, looking for jobs? No, we were going to put more time, effort, and energy into what we were doing. And so I really think with God's blessing and how we approached things, we just kept going.
Well, good. I always like you talking about that. Reminds me of when we would go home at night. My mind and motor runs really fast, and Crystal always told me when we pull into our neighborhood, there was a little brick entrance type thing there, and when we crossed that brick entrance, we had to stop talking about business. And there were times she stopped me mid sentence and made us stop. But it was a unique time, Crystal, with us working together. A lot of people say, how in the world did you do that? I mean, that's another one of those things that we found our place. We found what we do. It wasn't right in the beginning, as we know. There were times we would come home really frustrated with each other, or what was important that I felt was important may not be as important to her, and vice versa. And sometimes we just had to understand each other's priorities because we knew we were driving for the main thing. But I will say, that was a very unique time, and you really helped me through that as well. I had the motor, I had the ideas, but Crystal had the brains. I didn't want to say that, but she's really got that, and so that helped us a lot. Okay, Crystal, we had the business, we got started, and then we started seeing some more of my health issues come along, involved during all the craziness in the business.
We did really. I mean, we had ups and downs. There was different illnesses, quick little hospital stays here and there that we would work around. It's interesting because Ty is very public now about his story and his history, and not necessarily the details of his health, but, as far as the day to day and what goes on. But we didn't want anyone really to know what was happening. We didn't want people to know when things got scary, because we didn't also want it to affect our business. We didn't want people to think, oh gosh, are they going to make it? Maybe we should find another person to do our business with. So we were really careful about, oh yeah, he's not feeling too good. They had no idea he'd been in the hospital for 2 weeks. We just kept going. But in 2018, we really started to notice a decline in his kidney function. 2019 got really interesting. 2019, we could tell his decline in his kidney function was getting more and more. And, the doctors were saying, we're going to push this as long as we can push this, but, you're probably going to end up on dialysis when you just can't take it anymore and you can't push anymore. And so we were trying to handle that. I think we both handled it internally, separately for some way. We handle crisis differently, and we handle his health differently. And I think that was a little interesting to try to navigate. But in May of 2019, really big hospital stay, where they came in and told us, okay, yes, his kidney is done. It is not functioning enough to support daily life, and we need to go on dialysis. And I think that was a very somber moment for us. You had dodged dialysis for many times in the past, and that was a real down moment for us to think, okay, we've got to go on dialysis. How do we do that? That's very disruptive to life in general. It's very disruptive to owning a business and functioning. So how do we take care of this? And we just jumped in. That was really what we did. I think
options, right? It kind of went back into that no options mindset.
It really was, because what else are you going to do? You're going to give up. You're going to throw in the towel. And that wasn't an option for us either. Thankfully, we were both in agreement on that. I don't think we had to convince each other. We both just knew, okay, what's the next thing we have to do? Fine, let's tackle this. And we continued to run the business. We did let the staff know what was going on. We had to. We let some friends and family know what was going on. Again, we needed support and help. But 3 days a week, you went to dialysis from about 4:30 in the morning to 9:30 or 10 in the afternoon, depending on how the session went. With your blood sugar and things, sometimes that was really hard. So in the beginning, I think you went back to work and you tried to act like nothing happened and put on a brave face. And we would have meetings sometimes after, team meetings after the session. And then that kind of got less and less. It got harder and harder to keep going. We immediately got on the transplant list, and we always thought we had this, ace in our pocket. Ty's sister was also a match, as well as his brother, whenever the first transplant happened. And so we always knew that we had those ready to go whenever the next transplant was necessary. What we didn't know is that it is very unlikely for a second family member to be able to give in a subsequent transplant, that your body builds up antibodies against that particular DNA. And if your sister or sibling or another family member still has that it won't take. And that was another moment where we were like, oh my gosh, we can't, what we thought we had all these years, what kept us going, wasn't going to happen. And so I think, interesting enough, we didn't talk about it. I don't really remember us talking about it that much for a couple of days as we kind of digested, all right, what's our next step? Do we go get on the transplant list? We wait for another donor? What do we do? And I believe our youngest was 9 at the time. You never want both family members to be on an operating table at the same time. It's kind of a scary option. But I decided I wanted to go get tested. Funny story, I always thought I was A positive. I think that's because I always thought I had an A plus. I was kind of a good grade type of girl. And somehow I had in my head I was A positive. Ty is an O and can't receive from A. I said, okay, I'm going to go get on a paired donation. Can we do a paired donation? And we started that process with Houston Methodist and his transplant team.
And that means where she could donate her kidney to someone that matched myself, so I would receive the kidney, so we'd get moved up on the list, so I would not be in dialysis so long, right?
Right. I mean, you see it on the movies all the time, and mostly series and things like that, where they have 16 families that have gotten together, or 16 people, and he gives to her sister, and she gives to another person's brother, and it keeps going until everybody has what they need. So that's what I thought was going to happen. And what I didn't realize, because everybody talks about, oh, go sign up to be an organ donor, sign up to be an organ donor. And they don't talk about what happens when they need an organ. And I had no idea how much testing I was going to go through. The other part of it is that because he was a potential recipient, he could not go with me. So there are regulations in place to prevent any kind of coercion or anything like that. They want to make sure that they have the donor separately away from a potential recipient to make sure he's not pressuring you to do it or whatever the case is. So I had to go through psychological with social worker for hours at a time, lots of blood tests, all kinds of health tests and those things. And long story short, they came back and said, okay, yes, you fit, you're a candidate, this is great, we're going to move to day 2. And I said, okay, well, first of all, can you tell me a little bit more about how this paired match works? How long does this take? Is this a fast process? Because at that point, he had been on dialysis for several months, and I could really tell a decline in his mentality and his physicality. And so they said, well, why do you want to do a paired match? And I said, well, because I can't give directly to him. I'm a different blood type. And she came in and said, no, you're not. You're a perfect match. And my mother was with me. I immediately started crying, and I'm like, shut up. There's no way. I'm an A. And she goes, no, you're an O. You're a perfect match. And I said, well, God changed my blood type, because my whole life I have known, and to this day, I'm still looking for a piece of paper that says that I was A positive. So we went through the next process of.
Although she calls me after
Yes.
that and she's in tears, and I'm thinking, what is wrong? And that's what she tells me that. She says, Ty, God changed my blood type. She said, I'm a perfect match. And so that was really cool.
It was cool. And I think it's a great story. I think it's a great testament to our faith, because that was the first thing that came to mind. Not that I got it wrong, but more that God fixed it for us and moved it forward. And that was such a blessing to us. Never in my life was I afraid for myself or for the operation. I always had faith that this is what we were going to do. And honestly, that we had no option. What else were we going to do? I was a perfect match. I was there with him. I'm his caretaker. So, yes, of course it should be me. And I'm going to be fine. I had seen his mother, who had donated the first kidney. She never had anything from it. She was great for 20 years. And, she was in her late 70s at that time. And it was, I had no reason to be afraid. So we just pushed forward, and New Year's Eve 2019, we had the transplant, and everything went perfectly. So I got treated like a queen by the hospital as a donor. It was a really cool experience.
Yeah. Let me. She was in the presidential suites of the hospital. In fact, I think they did say that you're in the area where President Bush, when he comes to the hospital, and I was not.
You were not. No, you were completely in a different area, really quarantined off, which you have to be for transplant because of the immune suppression. But what was interesting is that all along, I've known him at that point for a long time, been dealing with going to the same transplant wing every 6 months or so for testing. And, I always felt fine. And some days he did, and some days he didn't. And I did not realize how your kidneys affect your energy level and your function. Not to mention it was a major surgery, but when we went back for visits we had to go for several visits for the next month. I noticed he had a whole lot of pep in his step and I did not. He was waiting on me to come. And I told the doctors, I was like, this is not fair. Like, I feel horrible. I have no energy. I can't make it through this. And he's just like skipping in here. And I don't understand what it is. And they said, well, for once, you feel like he felt before the surgery. So what happens is your kidney function goes down by 50% because you've removed a kidney and had a major surgery. And then after time, it rises back up to meet in the middle. So say you were at 100%, they take you down to 50, and then you kind of edge out around, 70 to 80%. And then you feel fine again. And he is hopped up on all kinds of medicine and steroids and all of that for the transplant, the anti-rejection drugs and all of those things, and his new lease on life. So he's feeling great. I think I caught back up pretty fast, but we had a great recovery and everything was great. And then we were able to come back home after about a month.
Yeah, I mean, that was a miracle that all that happened.
It was.
And then not, so we got through, I Crystal actually got over to my room when we were both in the hospital at the same time. They brought her over, and I got to see her for a little bit. She was doing really good. Just to have had a major surgery. Obviously, there was some pain and some things in there, but you did amazing. And then they kept us for a month, if I'm not mistaken. About a month, we went to a place which is a whole nother story, Nora's home.
Right.
That is where we stayed, and then every day we would come to the hospital for testing. Right?
Yes.
So talk a little bit about that. Now you were not only just went through surgery, but you're also a caretaker for me. And mom was there. Mom was there with us, which was absolutely very thankful for. But Crystal, you were kind of playing the role of a caretaker and trying to recover.
Right. I definitely was trying to, because that was my role and that was what I thought I was supposed to do. When we were signing up to stay in Nora's home, they said each one of us needed a caretaker. And I said, no, I'm his caretaker. I'm fine. And they said, no, baby girl, you're not fine. You're going to have been the donor. You need someone taking care of you, and he needs someone taking care of him. I mean, I had no idea. I really was so focused on, this is what we have to do. This is how we move forward. Let's get this done. And I wasn't thinking about each piece of the puzzle. And I really say that is kind of how we've approached everything in life that we've come across that has given us difficulty is, okay, how do we tackle this? Let's just move forward. We can cry about it later. We can worry about it later. We can think about it after it's done. But right now we need to move forward and get this done. And so your mother came and really she took care of both of us, cooked all the meals, did all the grocery shopping. It's kind of a home set up just for transplant patients. And so we got to meet other people that were in there going through the same thing, but it's really a safe environment, germ-free as much as possible, very close to the hospital with shuttles that go back and forth because you don't feel like driving. And so we did that for I think it was about 4 to 6 weeks. We ended up staying a little bit later because unbeknownst to us, COVID was brewing at that time. And our oldest daughter was supposed to come and help with us, had made arrangements to be there with us and cook most of the meals, and she got sick. The second or third day we were there, she got sick. I don't know if it was COVID because we didn't know about COVID at that time. It was 3 months later that COVID really became something. And so that put a whole new spin on life as well, having just come out of the transplant. But again, no immune system. Yeah. Another blessing though, because transplants really got put on hold when all of that started happening because resources, obviously, and then not knowing what was going on, the hospitals were overloaded. So had we not gotten that in when we did, you may have ended up on dialysis quite a bit longer. So sure. It was very fortunate.
Yeah, so we got through that. We got through North's home, and then you kind of mentioned that COVID hit, right? COVID, and then so we come home all masked. We've
Yeah.
got masks. So we come home to the world of COVID, and we also have a 9-year-old daughter at home.
Yes.
And as we mentioned, we also still own a business that we're having to run.
We did. The business, everybody stepped up. I mean, I can't and have told them thank you over and over forever, but they really took care of things. I thought, oh, I'll be fine. I'll work from the Nora's home. I'll log in every day. It was amazing how quick I shut all that off. I was not at all worried. I think really the stress and anxiety of the last 9 months really kind of kicked in, and I needed rest and recovery way more than I ever thought I did. And so those guys really kept the business running, and then we had to figure out how to get back in, not interrupt what they had already figured that works for everybody, but just get back in the move of day-to-day life. And I think that we did a great job. We made it happen. It wasn't without its mistakes, but we definitely kept things moving.
The COVID thing too, Crystal, kind of, if you think about it, it gave us that extra time for me to stay home.
It did.
And that was kind of an interesting time. I was the one that was kind of labeled to help Reese do her homework, and that was not a good plan. We ended up with I think we went fishing more than we were studying.
I think you did.
So Crystal was able to to really help me through all that. But you were juggling business, you were juggling caretaking, you were being a mom, being a wife, and there's so much more to this story that I just feel like. I mean, every time we talk about it, I think, oh my gosh. I mean, I don't know how she did it. I don't know how, and I'm not sure that she knows how she did it. But as far as just, God had His hand a lot in this story, and continues to do that. I mean, we see it daily. We see things going on. But I'll tell you, Crystal, that what you've done, it really defines the no options approach for us. People a lot of times think I'm the one that really pushes and is the no options, but I got to give. She's the silent weapon behind me that really helps me go. So thank you for that. I can't tell you how much I love you for all you've done.
I was happy to do it. I'm glad I was able to do it. I would do it again in a heartbeat. What we want to do is encourage people to keep pushing forward. It's hard, it's tiring, it's stressful. There's a lot of anxiety, but I believe that if you take that stuff and put it in a box, come back to that later after the crisis of whatever is going on is done, and then you can think about it, but you have to push forward. The option to give up was just not there. We were setting an example for both of our daughters, really, to tell them you set your mind to something and this is what you do. In this case, it was a life or death scenario, really. Dialysis, these folks that are on dialysis, it's brutal. It's brutal to watch, it's brutal to experience, and it's just not sustainable long term. So we weren't done. We still had things we wanted to do. This being one of them. We might not have known it at the time, but giving back and teaching people how to move forward was definitely something. But you have to think about, why do you experience the things you experience? You can get stuck in, why did I have to lose my job? Why did I have to get sick? Why did I have to be the one who had that car accident this morning? Whatever the case is, if you stop asking why and just push through it, and when you're on the other side, you never even know. 5 years later, you may realize you met someone along the way. You have a story now to tell someone else who might be going through it right at that moment. And I think that that's critical to why we have experiences in the first place. They can't all be good. I mean,
No,
there
you're
would
right.
be no lessons in that. So
No, and that's a good point. You and I talk about it on a daily basis with our daughters, with you and I,
yeah.
and sometimes it's her telling me, and a lot of times it's me telling you. But we got to stay positive. You got to we keep a positive mind through it, positive attitude, and let's get through it. Right? I mean, that's what you did through that, and you know, again, we couldn't have did it without God's hand, but
Right.
you got to go, you got to tackle it, or you've got to go to the fire. You got to figure it out. That's kind of what we talk about. Go tackle the problem. If you go in with a good attitude, because we fought through that, and we've been able to do this a lot of really.
Yeah.
I mean, since that surgery, we got our business now that we've moved on, right? We're working on we've had our exit strategy. We've implemented our exit strategy. We're at a different phase. But if we wouldn't have pushed through, we wouldn't be at that point. So
that's right.
Thank you, Crystal. I told you 100,000 times, but I'll tell you guys this: how in the world do you find a gift on Valentine's, on her birthday, on Mother's Day? What in the world can you give somebody that has given you life? I can't. There's not enough money in this world, so I always under deliver during those times. But
you do great.
but thank you, Crystal. Thank you, guys.
Thanks
And
so much.
I love you.
Thank you. Love you.